Salvete omnes! This is Magister Muth back to cover some Aeneid Book 4. I'm planning on prioritizing the lines that are new on the AP syllabus, so not spending time on lines that have already been very well covered by some other teachers. For example, Yagi's Latin is a great place to look. Uh, we're starting with lines 74 to 89 from Book 4. Just as a quick note before we get into it, as always, I recommend using these videos as a resource but not a replacement for your own studying. So it's a good idea to try the lines on your own first, use your commentaries and reference materials, and use the videos to get unstuck or to review lines that you've already covered. What I don't think this is good for is completely replacing that process of struggling with the language and working through it yourself. You'll grow a lot by using your brain. All right, with that, let's jump into line 74. So we are now early in book 4, which is all about the romance of Aeneas and Dido. So Dido has just been listening to Aeneas's tragic backstory of the Trojan War and his travels culminating with the storm that blew him on the coast of North Africa, and she realized that she has a crush on him. So these lines are all about how Dido is grappling with her feelings understood and not understood at this point. So nunc. Now let's look for our verb ducit. And we have a third person singular verb, he, she, or it. Our subject in context here is going to be Dido, who of course is a feminine subject, so we might have some nominatives describing her. So Dido leads, and who she lead? She leads Aineon. That's a Greek accusative form. Maybe it looks a little similar to an ending. You'll usually get a note on that on the AP. But yes, she leads Aeneas. She leads him se cum, with herself. You remember that cum with pronouns jumps on the end like that. And she leads him where? Per moinia, through the walls. That's a nice poetic word for wall. We get a lot in Vergil. And what do we do with this media? Well, it looks like it could be a feminine nominative, but I don't think it's the middle of Dido. So this is actually going to be a neuter accusative plural, going with moinia, through the middle of the walls. And I had a student point out that this makes a little bit of a word picture where Aeneas and Dido, Aeneon and Se, the words are literally in the middle of the walls. It's like they're in the city in the line. Pretty cool stuff. So she leads Aeneas through the middle of the walls, and she ostentat. She shows, and what's she going to show off? The Sidonias opes, Sidonian resources. Sidon, that's a Phoenician city, so it just basically means Carthaginian. So the Carthaginian resources, and bisque, linking two direct objects here, and the city that is parata, prepared. I remember that Dido is building a new civilization, so there's all sorts of construction and impressive stuff going on. Quick note on ostentat. This is from the root verb ostendo, which is kind of to stretch in front of someone, as in to show them. But the to suffix is something we call frequentative, which basically means it's something that happens over and over or a bunch. So it's not just that she shows him, points to it once, but she's showing him around. Little fun word roots there. All right, so what else does she do? Dido's still the subject. She incipit. She begins to do something. That's going to be effari, our deponent infinitive to speak or to speak out. This is from a verb that you don't see much until you hit poetry, but for, fari, fatus sum. It's a very common verb in Vergil that means to say or speak. And we actually get a lot of great English and Latin derivatives from this. For example, we have something that is unable to be spoken is ineffable from Pharr. We have that which has been spoken and decreed by the gods is fatum, fate. Something that is right, it is kind of according to what has been spoken by the gods, is fos, it's right. And its opposite, something wrong, is nephos, where we get nefarious. And we also have a fabula, something you tell someone. So I'm sure there are others, but I really like this verb, and it's a good one to unlock a lot of other words. All right, so what does Dido do? She begins to speak, and she restitit. She stops. She stops. Media in voce, ablative here, in the middle of her voice, or in the middle of speaking. So you might imagine someone who is nervous around someone they have a crush on. They kind of keep tripping over their words, starting to say something, cutting themselves off. Nunc. Now we have another now, which is a great example of anaphora, repetition of subsequent clauses starting with the same word. Now she does this, now she does this. Now she quaeretes, she looks for. And what's she looking for? We have some neuter plural objects, convivia, parties, in fact, specifically ea dem, the same parties. Notice the inflected ending is the ea there. She seeks out the same parties with our ablative absolute, with the da, with the day, labente. This is where we get slipping away. So what time of day is the day slipping away? It's going to be evening. And she seeks the same parties. Well, it's not expressed, but I think we're saying the same parties as Aeneas, trying to spend as much time as possible with her crush. So she seeks the same parties, and she exposcit. She demands something. She demands audire, to hear the Iliacos labores, masculine accusative plural, the labors of Ilium, as in the works of Troy. She wants to hear that iterum, again, being demens, literally out of her mind. So mindless, that's where we get demented. So she just wants to hear Aeneas' story over and over again. And here we get a nice kind of metaphor and idiom that we see in English too. She pendets, she hangs like a pendant or pendulum. And she hangs iterum, again and again idea, keeping repeated. She hangs ab ore, from the mouth. Now, if we look at narantis, this is a present active participle. But what case is it? Well, ans is our nominative, so antis is genitive. So if narans is telling, narantis is of the person who is telling something. So here we have a whole substantive person expressed just by this participle. So a narans is a person who's telling you something. Narantis is of the guy telling you it. So she hangs from the mouth of the one telling it. We still use this in English, hanging on his every word. Really paying rapt attention. Right, so she wants to hear stories again and again. Post, afterwards, we're going to treat this one as an adverb. It's actually not going to have an accusative object. So afterwards, when. So the next two lines are going to explain the time this was happening. So when digressi, participle, we need to fill in digressi sunt to make it a full verb. When they have gone away, they, I think, being the people at the parties, and when premit, when luna premit, when the moon presses. And what's it pressing? It's lumen. That's a neuter accusative. Presses its light. And this is an obscura luna, when the dark moon presses, premo primary pressing, presses its light, wekisin, kind of in turn. This weak root is where we get like vice versa, which has to do with some sort of reciprocity. So when the dark moon presses its light in turn, and when the cadentia sidera, the falling stars, suadent, they persuade or urge on, somnos, sleep. Technically, it's a poetic plural sleeps. I think in English, sleep sounds better. So what is the image Virgil's trying to give us? Well, we have the idea of a moon that grows dark and suppresses its light, and we have stars that are falling. Well, if you've ever spent a lot of time throughout the night looking at the stars, you might notice that throughout the night, the stars and the moon, they travel throughout the sky as the Earth rotates. So the idea is that the moon has risen and it has finally set many hours later. And the stars appear to be falling as if you're watching the sky hour after hour, falling away. So under what condition would someone observe this? If they're staying up all night. So here, throughout the long night, what does Dido do as our subject of Mairet? She grieves or mourns sola, alone, her ablative domo, in her house. So alone in her house, her empty house. She's sad. Why is Dido's house empty? You might remember that Dido's been widowed. Her husband, Sychaeus, was murdered by her wicked brother Pygmalion, trying to steal his money and power. And she's been fighting off other suitors, saying she wants to focus on her leadership and her city instead of matters of the heart. But right now, her house is feeling really lonely. So she grieves in her empty house, and incubat, she lies on the stratis relictis. These are going to be dative because we have a compound verb, in plus cubo, which often triggers a dative object in Latin with that prefix in. She lies on the stratis. These are the strata from sterno, the things having been kind of laid out, which think of strata meaning layers in English. These are going to be like bed sheets or coverings, blankets. The blankets that are relictis, left behind. And left behind by who? Well, the idea is that there was some big dinner party at Dido's house in a Greek or Roman style. They'd all be sitting on comfy couches with pillows and blankets, reclining and enjoying the feast. And so afterwards, she's sitting in the sheets or blankets that were left behind by Aeneas. So she wants to be close to him. She's sitting where he used to sit. And we have a great line here. Absens absentem auditque videtque. So someone is doing both listening and seeing. And we have this nice contrast between two forms of absens in the nominative and accusative, which is from absum, to be absent. So our subject, the absent one, well, that's going to still be Dido. The absent Dido sees and hears the absentem illum, that absent guy, which is Aeneas. So Aeneas is physically absent, but Dido, who's absent in another sense, perhaps absent-minded, she's not really all there. She's seeing and hearing this guy who's not there, replaying all the scenes. So you can see this is a pretty powerful image of someone who's just so enraptured by love or by a crush, perhaps relatable to some of our students today. So what else does she do? This is an interesting passage to say the least. So she detinet, she detains or holds in her gremio, she holds in her lap, Ascanium. And you might remember, who is Ascanius? That's the son of Aeneas. And she does this, we have an ablative absolute, with the imagine capta, with the image having been captured, the image of the genitor, of the father. Oh, she's basically offering to babysit, spend lots of time with cute little Ascanius, because he reminds her of his dad, of Aeneas. So another way she's trying to be close to him. Here, Ascanius is definitely seeming like a fairly young child, and if we might remember at the end of book one, Venus even does a little switcheroo for the night by putting Cupid in disguise in place of Ascanius, so he kind of breathes out love vibes while he's being a cute little kid and playing with the queen. So here we see that once again, Ascanius' family resemblance is important. Now, continuity-wise, Ascanius, I feel like, grows up really quick and seems more like a teenager in the later parts of the Aeneid, but hey, it's poetry. We don't have to be perfectly consistent. So she's babysitting Ascanius, and she's doing this see if, kind of more of an as if here, as if possit, as if she should be able, a present subjunctive, so it's kind of a little more hypothetical here, as if she should be able to fallere, to deceive, a infandum amor, a love that is infandum, unspeakable, another for Pharr connection, it can't be for Pharr. So, what's unspeakable about her love for Aeneas, right? It seems like she's keeping it on the down low right now, but she can't trick herself. And we might think, why might she be so willing to suppress her love for Aeneas? I think some of it is probably has to do with her old husband, Sychaeus. So she doesn't want to betray his memory and hasn't been interested in love since he died. Some of it might be because of the opinion of her people, the Carthaginians. Right? They might say, well, why are you choosing this Aeneas guy? Why are you getting distracted? You know, you're a queen, you're a leader. There might even be some ethnic tension. Who are these Trojans? You know, they're not part of our people. Why are you giving them such a prime position? Another group that might make her hesitate are their neighbors. Those are the other powerful established civilizations in North Africa who are kind of the big kids on the block and are really just letting Carthage survive at their pleasure. And many of their leaders, including a powerful king Iarbas, we'll hear about later, keep making marriage proposals to Dido, and she keeps putting them off, saying, I'm focusing on my work, I'm focusing on the memory of my dead husband, so they might not like it either. And we might even say that the Trojans might have some mixed opinions here if she's distracting Aeneas from their true mission, which is founding a new Troy. So now for these last couple lines, we get into what is the impact of Dido's distraction. At this point, something non ad surgunt is not rising, and those are the tures, the towers which are koiptae, having been begun from koipi. So the towers they started to build, non ad surgunt, they aren't rising. The juventus, which is a collective noun, feminine for the youth, non exercet, they are not exercising their arms. So their military training is starting to get lax. And now we're going to have a way or this, out or this. Both of those, either this is not happening or this happening. We are going to have to continue the negative idea here because these are a bunch of things that aren't happening. So the portus, port, and the propugnacula, the things in front of the fighting, which are basically defenses or ramparts. Imagine fortifications for the city. Those things, non parent, they are not preparing for bellum, for war. And what type of propugnacula? Tuta, safe defenses. So I think sometimes the missing negative might throw us, but if we go at speed, we'll probably see it. So the begun towers are not rising, and the youth are not practicing their arms, or the port preparing for war, or the safe defenses preparing for war. So even though he doesn't repeat the negative, I think we can see these are all things that aren't happening. And lastly, some stuff pendant, now hanging in a different sense. The opera, the works, that's a neuter plural subject. The interrupted works, they are hanging. It's like left hanging, right? They're hanging unfinished. And the meani, the kind of things that are menoring, looming over you, as in the towers, the huge towers of the walls. And we only have the one verb. They also pendant. They're also hanging interrupted. And the machina, some machine or mechanism, which is aequata, perfect passive participle, having been equaled to the kailo, to the sky. Uh, so, what are all these things? These are the construction works, the building projects, the towers. Perhaps this machina is even referring to an ancient crane, which we have some examples, like on the tomb of a Hateri, with a sort of hamster wheel that lifts up this big beam that can lift things on ropes. So all of the construction effort has ground to a halt. All right, so we'll see where Aeneas and Dido's love affair continues and develops later in this chapter. Walete, everyone.